The blazing Arizona sun beat down mercilessly on Dr. Sarah Chen's back as she carefully brushed sand away from what she hoped was another fossil specimen. The remote stretch of the Sonoran Desert had already yielded 3 promising finds this week, and her team from the University of Colorado was making excellent progress on their paleontological survey. At 32, Sarah had built a solid reputation in her field, but she still felt the familiar thrill of discovery every time her brush revealed something new beneath the ancient sediment. "Hey Sarah, you might want to see this," called Jake Morrison, one of her graduate students, from about 50 yards away. His voice carried an odd note that made her look up from her work. Sarah wiped the sweat from her forehead with the back of her gloved hand and stood up, her joints protesting after hours of crouching. The desert stretched endlessly in all directions, a sea of reddish sand punctuated by hardy cacti and scrub brush. In the distance, purple mountains shimmered in the heat haze. She had always found the desert beautiful in its harsh simplicity, but today something felt different. The usual sounds of desert life seemed muted, as if the very air was holding its breath. "What is it, Jake?" she called back, making her way carefully across the uneven ground. Her hiking boots crunched on the gravelly surface as she navigated between scattered rocks and low-growing desert plants. Jake was standing next to what appeared to be a large depression in the ground, roughly circular and about 20 feet across. But, as Sarah approached, she realized it wasn't a natural formation. The edges were too clean, too precise. It looked almost like something had crashed here, creating a shallow crater in the desert floor. "This wasn't here yesterday," Jake said, scratching his head beneath his wide-brimmed hat. "I'm sure of it. We walked right through this area when we were setting up the grid." Sarah knelt at the edge of the depression and ran her fingers along the rim. The sand was compressed in a way that suggested tremendous force, but there was something else. A faint, almost metallic smell hung in the air, different from the usual sense of sage and dry earth that characterized the desert. Could be a meteorite impact, she mused, though something about the formation nagged at her. But the edges are awfully smooth for that. And where's the debris field? As they stood there puzzling over the strange crater, a low sound drifted across the desert. It was unlike anything Sarah had ever heard, not quite a growl, not quite a whistle, but something that seemed to vibrate through the ground itself. Both researchers froze, looking around for the source. "Did you hear that?" Jake whispered, his earlier enthusiasm replaced by unease. Sarah nodded slowly. The sound came again, longer this time, and definitely from somewhere beyond a cluster of large boulders about 100 yards to the north. Without thinking, she started walking in that direction. "Sarah, maybe we should get the others first," Jake called after her, but she was already committed to investigating. As she rounded the boulder formation, Sarah stopped so suddenly that Jake nearly crashed into her. There, in a sheltered depression between the rocks, were 3 creatures unlike anything she had ever seen or imagined. They were roughly the size of large horses, but their resemblance to any earthly animal ended there. Their bodies were covered in scales that shifted color in the sunlight, ranging from deep emerald to brilliant gold. Each creature had 4 powerful legs ending in clawed feet, and, from their shoulders sprouted wings that were currently folded against their sides. Their heads were elongated and graceful, with intelligent golden eyes that tracked every movement. Most striking of all, wisps of what looked like steam or very faint smoke occasionally escaped their nostrils. "Dragons," Jake breathed beside her. "Actual dragons." But these were not the mythical creatures of fairy tales. There was something unmistakably alien about them, from the way their scales seemed to contain their own inner light to the subtle wrongness of their proportions that suggested they had evolved under different physical laws. And they were clearly in distress. The largest of the 3, whose scales showed more gold than the others, was lying on its side. A piece of what looked like twisted metal protruded from its flank, and a dark substance that might have been blood stained the sand beneath it. The other 2 creatures, one slightly smaller with predominantly silver scales, and one that was clearly much younger with bright green coloration, were making the low, musical sounds that had first attracted Sarah's attention. The injured dragon's eyes fixed on Sarah as she approached slowly, hands raised to show she meant no harm. There was an intelligence in that gaze that sent chills down her spine. These were not mere animals. "Easy," she whispered, as much to herself as to the creatures. "Easy there." The younger dragon took a protective stance between Sarah and the injured one, spreading its wings slightly and letting out a warning hiss. But the largest dragon made a sound that was clearly meant to calm its companion, and the smaller one reluctantly stepped aside. Sarah knelt in the sand about 10 feet away, studying the wounded creature. The metal embedded in its side was definitely not of earthly origin. It had a peculiar blue-green tinge and seemed to shimmer with its own light. The wound was clearly serious, but not immediately life-threatening if treated properly. "Jake, go back and get my medical kit from the truck," she said quietly, not taking her eyes off the dragons. "And bring the satellite phone. We need to contact the university." "Sarah, what are we dealing with here?" Jake's voice was tight with barely controlled panic. "These things aren't supposed to exist." "I know," she replied calmly. "But they're here, and they're hurt, and right now that's all that matters." After Jake left, Sarah remained motionless, simply observing the creatures. The injured dragon's breathing was labored but steady. The silver-scaled one, which she was beginning to think of as the female of the species, though she had no real basis for that assumption, was gently grooming the wounded dragon's neck with obvious affection. The younger one kept looking between Sarah and the adults, clearly torn between curiosity and caution. It was the young one that finally made the first move toward communication. It approached slowly, staying low to the ground in what was clearly a non-threatening posture. When it was about 5 feet away, it sat back on its haunches and tilted its head, studying Sarah with the same intensity she was showing toward them. Then, to Sarah's amazement, it began to make a series of soft, musical sounds that were clearly some form of language. The tones rose and fell in complex patterns, occasionally punctuated by what sounded almost like clicks or chirps. It was definitely communication, and it was definitely intelligent. "I'm sorry," Sarah said softly. "I don't understand." The young dragon paused, then repeated the same sequence of sounds more slowly, as if trying to make itself understood. When Sarah could only shake her head apologetically, the creature appeared to think for a moment. Then, it did something that made Sarah's breath catch in her throat. It began to trace patterns in the sand with one clawed finger. The marks were clearly deliberate, forming geometric shapes that became increasingly complex. After a few minutes, Sarah realized she was looking at what could only be described as mathematical equations, advanced ones that dealt with principles of physics she recognized from her undergraduate science requirements. "You're trying to show me you're intelligent," she whispered in amazement. "You understand that I might not recognize it otherwise." The dragon looked up at her and made what sounded almost like a pleased chirp. Then, it pointed to the wounded adult and traced another symbol in the sand, one that looked remarkably like the human medical symbol of a cross. "You want me to help," Sarah said, understanding flooding through her. "You know I'm intelligent too, and you're asking for medical assistance." By the time Jake returned with the medical supplies and several other members of their research team, Sarah had managed to establish a basic form of communication with the young dragon. The creature had demonstrated an understanding of mathematical concepts, had drawn recognizable star patterns that matched constellations visible from Earth, and had even managed to convey the concept of 3 individuals traveling together through space. Dr. Robert Martinez, the expedition leader, stared at the scene in complete disbelief. "Sarah, what exactly are you telling me here?" "I'm telling you that these are clearly extraterrestrial beings of high intelligence who have crash-landed in our desert," Sarah replied matter-of-factly. "Their ship, or whatever they were traveling in, apparently broke up during landing, and one of them is seriously injured. They've been trying to communicate with me, and they want our help." The injured dragon had been watching the new arrivals with obvious wariness, but when Sarah approached with her medical kit, it remained still. The trust the creature was showing was both humbling and terrifying. "I need to remove this metal fragment," Sarah explained to her colleagues while opening her kit. "It's clearly causing internal damage, and if we don't act soon, this creature could die." "Sarah, you're a paleontologist, not a veterinarian," Dr. Martinez protested. "We have no idea what their physiology is like, what might be toxic to them, or even how their organs are arranged." "Then, we learn," Sarah replied simply. "The young one is trying to show us things. Look." The green-scaled dragon had indeed been busy during the adults' discussion. In the sand around the injured dragon, it had drawn what was clearly an anatomical diagram. The drawing showed the placement of vital organs, the circulatory system, and even indicated the exact location where the metal fragment was causing problems. "This is incredible," breathed Dr. Jennifer Walsh, the team's xenogeologist. "It's a complete medical diagram. They want us to understand their biology so we can help." Sarah studied the diagram carefully, comparing it to the visible wound. The fragment appeared to be pressing against what the drawing indicated was a major circulatory vessel, the equivalent of an artery. If it shifted much more, it could cause catastrophic internal bleeding. "I need to do this now," Sarah said, pulling on surgical gloves from her kit. "The longer we wait, the more dangerous it becomes." She approached the injured dragon slowly, medical tools in hand. The creature's golden eyes fixed on hers, and she was struck again by the profound intelligence she saw there. This was not an animal accepting help from humans, this was one sentient being trusting another with its life. The procedure was tense and delicate. Sarah had to work largely by instinct, using the anatomical diagram as her guide while relying on her general knowledge of biology and first aid. The metal fragment was deeply embedded and clearly causing significant pain, but the dragon remained perfectly still throughout the extraction. When she finally pulled the piece free, dark blood flowed from the wound for a moment before beginning to clot. The dragon let out a long, shuddering breath that sounded like relief. Sarah quickly applied pressure and, then, began cleaning and bandaging the wound with supplies from her kit. As she worked, she became aware that all three dragons were making soft, harmonious sounds together. It took her a moment to realize they were singing a complex, beautiful melody that seemed to express gratitude, hope, and something that might have been joy. When Sarah finally finished treating the wound, the young dragon approached her again. This time, it gently touched her hand with its snout in what was clearly a gesture of thanks. Then, it began drawing in the sand again. This new diagram was different from the others. It showed what appeared to be a large structure, clearly artificial and definitely not of earthly origin. The dragon pointed to the drawing, then to the sky, then back to the three of them. The message was clear: they had come from somewhere else, in something that was now apparently lost. But, then, the dragon drew something else. A smaller shape, separate from the main structure but clearly connected to it. It pointed to this secondary shape, then gestured toward the depression where Sarah and Jake had first noticed something was wrong. "There's something else out there," Sarah realized aloud. "Part of their craft, or an escape pod maybe. It's somewhere in the desert." The implications were staggering. Not only had Sarah and her team made first contact with an alien species, but there might be technology out there that could revolutionize human understanding of the universe. More immediately, it might be technology that could help these stranded beings return home. As the sun began to set over the Arizona desert, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and purple, Sarah found herself sitting in the sand surrounded by three alien dragons, trying to process the magnitude of what had happened. In the space of a single day, everything humanity thought it knew about its place in the universe had changed forever. The injured dragon was resting more comfortably now, its breathing easier and its color improved. The silver-scaled one had settled down beside it, maintaining what was clearly a protective watch. The young green one had curled up near Sarah's feet and appeared to be sleeping, though its ears remained alert for any sound of danger. "We need to contact the authorities," Dr. Martinez was saying into the satellite phone, speaking to someone back at the university. "No, I don't care how crazy it sounds. Send whoever you think is appropriate, but keep this quiet for now. The last thing we need is a media circus before we understand what we're dealing with." Sarah only half listened to the conversation. Her attention was focused on the young dragon at her feet, whose scales seemed to shimmer with their own inner light in the gathering dusk. Occasionally, it would open one golden eye to look at her, and she was struck by the feeling that it was as curious about her as she was about it. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. There would be officials to deal with, decisions to make about the dragon's welfare, and the urgent need to locate whatever technology had brought them to Earth. But, for now, in the peaceful silence of the desert evening, Sarah simply marveled at the fact that humanity was no longer alone in the universe. The dragon's soft, musical breathing gradually lulled her into a sense of calm she hadn't felt since the discovery began. Whatever came next, she was determined to protect these remarkable beings and help them find their way home. It was a responsibility she had never expected to carry, but one she accepted without hesitation. As the first stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Sarah wondered if one of those distant points of light was home to these magnificent creatures. Tomorrow, she would begin the process of finding out. The morning sun cast long shadows across the makeshift camp that had sprung up around the Dragon landing site overnight. Sarah stretched her stiff muscles as she emerged from her tent, grateful that the university had acted quickly to send additional supplies and personnel. The three dragons were awake and alert, the young green one immediately approaching her with what she had come to recognize as their species' version of a greeting, a soft, musical trill accompanied by a gentle touch of snout to hand. The injured dragon, whom Sarah had privately begun calling Atlas due to his golden coloring and obvious leadership role, was showing remarkable improvement. The wound was healing faster than should have been possible, and Sarah suspected there was something in their alien physiology that accelerated the process. He was able to stand and move around, though he still favored the injured side. Dr. Elena Vasquez, a xenobiologist who had arrived on the first helicopter the night before, was setting up sophisticated monitoring equipment while trying not to appear threatening to their guests. "The electromagnetic readings are off the charts," she reported to Sarah. "These creatures are generating some kind of bioelectric field. It might explain their rapid healing capabilities." Sarah nodded, watching as the silver-scaled dragon, she had taken to thinking of her as Luna, carefully examined each piece of equipment the humans brought near. The creature's intelligence was evident in the way she studied the devices, clearly trying to understand their purpose and function. "Any word from the search teams?" Sarah asked Dr. Martinez, who was coordinating the effort to locate the dragon's missing technology. "Ground-penetrating radar picked up several anomalous signals about 3 miles northeast of here," he replied. "The team should reach the first location within the hour." The young dragon, whom Sarah had dubbed Sage due to his obvious curiosity and quick learning, had been working on something in the sand near the camp. As Sarah approached, she saw that he had created an elaborate three-dimensional map using rocks, sticks, and carefully shaped sand formations. The detail was incredible, showing the local terrain with remarkable accuracy. But what caught Sarah's attention were the small symbols Sage had placed at specific locations throughout the map. Each symbol was different, but they were clearly markers of some kind. When she looked closer, she realized that one of them matched perfectly with their current location. "You're showing us where your technology landed," she said with growing excitement. "All the pieces of your craft scattered across the desert." Sage made an affirmative sound and pointed to the symbol furthest from their current position. He then made a series of urgent noises while pointing to the sky, clearly indicating that whatever was at that location was important for their ability to return home. Dr. Vasquez approached with a tablet displaying the radar results. "Sarah, you need to see this. The signal the search teams are heading toward, it matches exactly with one of the markers on this map." Sarah felt a thrill of excitement mixed with apprehension. The dragon's technology was clearly far beyond anything humanity had achieved. The implications for science, for space travel, for humanity's future among the stars were staggering. But, more immediately, it meant hope for reuniting these stranded beings with their own kind. Atlas approached slowly, still moving carefully to avoid aggravating his wound. When he reached the sand map, he studied it for a long moment before making a low, complex sound that seemed to carry multiple layers of meaning. Luna and Sage both responded, creating what sounded like a three-way conversation. They're discussing strategy, Sarah realized. Planning something. Sage began modifying the map, adding new details and rearranging some of the markers. The conversation between the three dragons became more animated, with gestures toward different parts of the map and occasional glances at the human observers. Dr. Chen called Jake from the communications tent. "We're getting reports from Search Team Alpha. They've found something." Sarah hurried to the radio, with Dr. Vasquez and Dr. Martinez close behind. The voice crackling through the static was barely contained excitement. "Base camp, this is Alpha Team. We've located what appears to be a metallic object partially buried in a wash about 50 meters from our target coordinates. The metal has that same blue-green coloration you described, and it's definitely not terrestrial in origin. The object is roughly cube-shaped, about 3 meters on each side, and appears to be intact. Sarah felt her pulse quicken. Any signs of activity? Energy readings? That's the strange part, came the reply. Our instruments are going crazy around this thing. Electromagnetic activity is spiking intermittently, and Jenkins swears he heard musical tones coming from inside it. Musical tones. Sarah looked back at the dragons, who were listening intently to the radio conversation despite presumably not understanding the language. Their expressions, and, yes, she was becoming convinced they had expressions, showed what looked like hope mixed with concern. Alpha Team, maintain a safe distance from the object, Dr. Martinez instructed. Set up a perimeter and wait for further instructions. Do not attempt to interact with it directly. But, even as he spoke, the dragons were reacting to something the humans couldn't perceive. All three creatures had turned toward the northeast, their heads tilted in identical listening postures. Then, in perfect unison, they began to sing. The sound was unlike anything they had produced before. Where their previous communications had been musical and pleasant, this was something that seemed to resonate in the very bones of everyone present. It was a song of such profound beauty and complexity that several of the human observers felt tears spring to their eyes without understanding why. The radio crackled to life again. Base camp, you need to hear this. The object is responding to something. The musical tones from inside are getting stronger, and they're matching some kind of pattern. Sarah realized what was happening. They're communicating with their technology. Calling to it somehow. The song continued for several more minutes before gradually fading to silence. Atlas approached Sarah and began drawing in the sand with urgent, quick strokes. The diagram he created showed what appeared to be a sequence of actions, symbols that might represent the process of activating or operating some kind of device. He's trying to tell us how to help, Sarah said, studying the drawing. But we need to be there, at the site. Dr. Martinez shook his head firmly. Absolutely not. We have no idea what that technology might do if activated. For all we know, it could be a weapon. It's not a weapon, Sarah replied with conviction. Look at them. These are peaceful beings who trusted us enough to let me treat Atlas's wounds. They could have easily hurt us if they'd wanted to. They're asking for our help because they need it. Sage approached and began adding to Atlas's diagram. His addition showed human figures working alongside dragon figures, clearly illustrating cooperation rather than the dragons working alone. They need us, Sarah continued. For some reason, they can't operate their own technology without human assistance. Dr. Vasquez was studying the diagrams with her scientific instruments, trying to analyze the symbols and patterns. Sarah's right about one thing, she said slowly. These drawings suggest some kind of symbiotic operation. The technology requires both species to function. The debate might have continued indefinitely, but it was interrupted by an urgent call from Alpha Team. Base camp, we have a situation. The object is beginning to emit light, and the musical tones are getting much louder. Whatever's happening, it's accelerating. Atlas made a sound of obvious distress and pointed urgently toward the northeast. The message was clear, time was running out. I'm going, Sarah announced, already moving toward the helicopter that had brought Dr. Vasquez. With or without approval. Sarah, wait, Dr. Martinez called, but Atlas was already moving. Despite his injuries, the golden dragon spread his wings and launched himself into the air with powerful beats. He circled the camp once before landing near Sarah, clearly indicating his intention to accompany her. The dragon wants to go with her, Dr. Vasquez observed unnecessarily. And, honestly, given what we're dealing with, having one of them there might be the only way to safely interact with their technology. Luna and Sage were also agitated now, clearly torn between wanting to go with Atlas and recognizing that he was still recovering from his injuries. After a brief three-way conversation in their musical language, Luna spread her wings and took to the air, joining Atlas near the helicopter. "It looks like I'm getting an escort whether I want one or not," Sarah said, checking her equipment pack. "At least this way we'll have direct communication with beings who actually understand the technology." The flight to the Alpha Team's location took only 15 minutes, but it felt like hours to Sarah. Below them, the two dragons flew with an effortless grace that made the helicopter seem clumsy by comparison. They stayed in perfect formation, occasionally calling to each other in what sounded like tactical communications. When they reached the site, Sarah could immediately see why the search team was nervous. The partially buried object was pulsing with soft blue-green light, and the air around it seemed to shimmer with energy. Even from a distance, she could hear the musical tones, a complex, shifting melody that seemed to respond to the presence of the approaching dragons. Atlas and Luna landed near the object and began making sounds that were clearly some form of technological communication. The tones from the device immediately shifted in response, becoming more organized and purposeful. "It's recognizing them," Sarah said into her radio as she approached on foot. "The technology is programmed to respond to their species." But, as she got closer, something unexpected happened. The device's tones shifted again, becoming more complex. Atlas looked at Sarah and made an urgent gesture toward the object, while Luna began drawing rapidly in the sand. The diagram Luna created was startling in its implications. It showed two different types of neural or brain patterns, one clearly representing the dragon species, and another that, while different, was remarkably similar. The second pattern was being indicated as necessary for the device's operation. "It needs both," Sarah breathed into her radio. "The technology requires input from two compatible but distinct neural patterns. That's why they need our help. Our brain structure is similar enough to theirs to provide the second key." Dr. Martinez's voice crackled through the radio with obvious concern. "Sarah, you're talking about interfacing with completely unknown alien technology. We have no idea what the risks might be." But Atlas was already approaching the device, and the musical tones were becoming more urgent. The golden dragon looked back at Sarah with an expression that clearly communicated the need for haste. Whatever window of opportunity existed, it was closing rapidly. Sarah made her decision. She approached the device slowly, with Atlas matching her pace. The object was beautiful in an alien way, its surface covered with intricate patterns that seemed to shift and flow like liquid metal. As she got closer, she could feel a strange tingling sensation, as if the air itself was charged with energy. Atlas placed one clawed hand on the device's surface, and immediately the patterns began to glow more brightly. He looked at Sarah expectantly, then gestured to a section of the surface that was smooth and unmarked. "Here goes nothing," Sarah muttered, and placed her palm against the alien metal. The reaction was immediate and overwhelming. Information flooded into her mind, not words or images, but pure understanding. She saw the dragon's world, a beautiful planet with floating cities and crystalline forests. She experienced their culture, their science, their exploration of the stars. And she understood their desperate situation. They were not just travelers who had crashed on Earth. They were refugees. Their homeworld was dying, consumed by a cosmic phenomenon that their technology could not stop. The dragons, who called themselves the Veilthera, had been forced to flee, scattering across the galaxy in search of new homes. This small family unit had been heading toward a promising world when their ship suffered catastrophic damage. But there was hope. The device Sarah was touching was not just a communication array, it was a beacon that could signal other Veilthera ships. More importantly, it could identify worlds suitable for their species to inhabit. And, in its analysis of Earth, it had discovered something remarkable. Earth and the Veilthera homeworld had nearly identical neural resonance frequencies. Not only could the two species communicate and cooperate, but their combined mental capabilities could operate technologies that neither could use alone. They were meant to work together. The vision lasted only moments in real time, but it felt like hours to Sarah. When she finally lifted her hand from the device, she found tears streaming down her face. Atlas was looking at her with an expression of profound gratitude and hope. Sarah, report, Dr. Martinez's voice came through the radio.
What happened?
Sarah wiped her eyes and took a shaky breath.
I understand now. They're not just visitors, they're looking for a new home.
And they think Earth might be it.
The implications were staggering.
Humanity was being offered the chance to join a galactic community, to learn technologies beyond their wildest dreams, to explore the stars alongside beings who had been doing so for millennia. But it would require trust, cooperation, and the willingness to share their world.
The device was still humming with energy, its patterns now showing a steady, purposeful flow. Atlas gestured to Sarah, indicating that the process was not yet complete.
There was more work to be done, more understanding to be achieved. As Luna began creating new diagrams in the sand around the device, Sarah realized that this was only the beginning. The next phase would require her to make decisions that would affect not just the fate of 3 stranded aliens, but potentially the future of both their species. The sun was beginning to set over the Arizona desert once again, but Sarah knew that this night would bring no rest. There was too much to learn, too much to understand, and too much at stake. Humanity stood at the threshold of a new age, and Sarah found herself in the position of helping to decide whether that door would open. In the distance, she could see more helicopters approaching, no doubt carrying officials and scientists who would want to take control of the situation. But, for now, in this moment between worlds and species, she was simply a woman in the desert, working alongside alien beings to solve problems that would reshape the future of Earth itself. 3 weeks had passed since Sarah's first contact with the device, and the remote desert site had been transformed into a bustling international research facility. Representatives from NASA, the European Space Agency, the United Nations, and several military organizations had descended upon the location, bringing with them a mix of wonder, suspicion, and barely contained excitement about humanity's first contact with intelligent alien life. Sarah stood in the main command tent, watching as Atlas worked alongside Dr. Yamamoto, a quantum physicist from Tokyo, to calibrate one of the recovered Veilthera devices.
The cooperation between human and alien scientists had progressed remarkably quickly once both sides overcame their initial caution.
Atlas's patient explanations, delivered through the unique neural interface that Sarah had discovered, were revolutionizing human understanding of physics, energy manipulation, and space travel. The quantum resonance field is stabilizing, Dr. Yamamoto reported, his voice filled with awe. Sarah, what Atlas is showing us about manipulating spacetime at the molecular level, it's going to change everything we know about propulsion and energy generation.
Sarah nodded, though her attention was divided between the scientific breakthrough and a more pressing concern.
Through the tent's opening, she could see Luna and Sage working with a team of linguists and communication specialists, painstakingly building a more sophisticated translation protocol. But what worried her were the military personnel who seemed to be increasing in number each day.
General Harrison, the Pentagon's liaison to the project, approached with his usual stern expression. Dr. Chen, we need to discuss the security implications of this technology. The potential for weapons applications is significant.
General, with respect, that's exactly the wrong way to think about this, Sarah replied firmly. The Veilthera are offering us partnership, not conquest. They're refugees looking for a place to rebuild their civilization alongside ours.
That's a very optimistic interpretation, the general countered.
But we have to consider all possibilities. These beings have technology that could devastate our military capabilities if used against us. Sarah was about to respond when Atlas approached, having apparently sensed the tension in the conversation. The Golden Dragon had become remarkably adept at reading human body language and emotional states over the past weeks. He made a series of musical sounds while drawing quickly in the sandy floor of the tent. The diagram he created showed 2 groups of figures, clearly representing humans and Veilthera, standing together on one side, facing what appeared to be a vast, dark void on the other. The message was clear: they faced a common threat that was far more serious than any concerns about each other.
He's trying to tell us something about what destroyed their homeworld, Sarah realized. General, I think we're missing the bigger picture here. At that moment, Dr. Vasquez hurried into the tent with a tablet displaying astronomical data. Sarah, we've been analyzing the star charts the Veilthera provided, tracking the path of whatever phenomenon destroyed their planet.
If our calculations are correct, it's heading toward this part of the galaxy. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. How long do we have? Based on the rate of expansion they've described, approximately 200 years before it reaches our solar system. General Harrison looked skeptical. That assumes they're telling us the truth about this supposed threat. Atlas began drawing again, this time creating a much more complex diagram that showed the progression of the cosmic phenomenon across multiple star systems. The detail was incredible, showing the collapse of stars, the destruction of planets, and the desperate exodus of various alien species fleeing the advancing darkness. Luna entered the tent at that moment, accompanied by Dr. Sarah Williams, a xenopsychologist who had been working to understand Veilthera emotional and social structures. The silver-scaled dragon immediately sensed the tension in the room and added her own drawing to Atlas's, showing what appeared to be a vast network of refugee populations scattered across the galaxy. They're not the only ones, Dr. Williams explained. Luna has been describing a confederation of species that survived the destruction of their homeworlds. They've been searching for a way to stop this phenomenon for over a millennium. And they think Earth is the key, Sarah added, the pieces beginning to fall into place. Not just as a refuge, but as a staging ground for fighting back. The implications were staggering. Humanity was being offered a choice between isolation and involvement in a galactic struggle for survival. But it was a choice that came with tremendous responsibilities and risks. Sage bounded into the tent with his characteristic youthful enthusiasm, immediately beginning an animated conversation with Atlas and Luna in their musical language. The exchange was rapid and complex, clearly conveying important information. What are they saying? General Harrison demanded. Sarah placed her hand on the translation device that the Veilthera had helped construct, a remarkable piece of biotech that could interpret their neural patterns and convert them into human language. The conversation that flowed through the device made everyone present pause in stunned silence. The young dragon was reporting the arrival of another ship. A Veilthera vessel is approaching our solar system, Sarah translated, her voice tight with excitement and apprehension. They received the beacon signal we activated and are coming to investigate. Dr. Martinez, who had been quietly observing from the corner of the tent, stepped forward. How long before they arrive? Atlas provided the answer through a series of rapid calculations drawn in the sand. The ship would reach Earth's orbit within 72 hours. This changes everything, General Harrison said, immediately reaching for his radio. I need to contact Washington immediately. Wait, Sarah interjected. Before you bring in more military personnel, consider what message that sends. These are refugees making contact with other refugees. If the first thing they see when they arrive is a show of force, it could destroy any chance of alliance. Luna began drawing again, creating a diagram that showed the approaching vessel and its occupants. The ship was larger than the small craft that had brought Atlas, Luna, and Sage to Earth, but it was clearly damaged. The beings aboard were in desperate need of assistance. They're not coming as conquerors, Sarah interpreted. They're coming as survivors looking for sanctuary. And they're bringing information about other species in the Confederation, potential allies in the fight against the cosmic phenomenon. Atlas added his own details to Luna's drawing, showing what appeared to be a meeting between multiple species around Earth. The implications were clear. This was meant to be a gathering point, a place where the scattered remnants of galactic civilization could come together and plan their resistance. You're talking about turning Earth into a staging area for an interstellar war, General Harrison said grimly. I'm talking about preventing the extinction of all intelligent life in this part of the galaxy, Sarah replied. Including us. The debate continued for hours, with representatives from various Earth governments and organizations weighing in via secure communications. Meanwhile, the Veilthera worked tirelessly to prepare for the arrival of their kin, setting up communication arrays and preparing cultural briefings that would help ease the first contact process. Sarah found herself at the center of it all, serving as the primary human liaison with the Veilthera due to her unique compatibility with their neural interface technology. It was a responsibility that sometimes felt overwhelming, but one she embraced fully. She had seen into their minds, understood their culture and their desperate situation, and knew beyond doubt that they were sincere in their desire for peaceful cooperation.
As the appointed time approached, tension at the facility reached a fever pitch. The approaching Valthera vessel had been tracked by every major space agency on Earth, its exotic energy signature unlike anything in human experience. Military forces had been placed on high alert worldwide, while scientists prepared for what could be the most significant moment in human history. Sarah stood in the newly constructed landing area, a flat section of desert that had been cleared and equipped with the communication devices Atlas and his companions had built. The three dragons stood beside her, their scales shimmering with what she had learned was a sign of emotional excitement among their species. The ship appeared first as a point of light in the clear desert sky, growing larger as it descended. It was beautiful in an alien way, its hull flowing and organic-looking, as if it had been grown rather than built. Damaged sections were clearly visible, with missing hull plates and what appeared to be makeshift repairs made during the long journey to Earth. As the vessel settled onto the desert floor with a whisper of displaced air, Atlas, Luna, and Sage began singing, a complex, harmonious melody that Sarah now recognized as a traditional Valthera greeting. The ship's hull began to glow in response, patterns of light flowing across its surface in what was clearly a musical reply. An opening appeared in the vessel's side, and the first of Earth's new visitors emerged. They were larger than Atlas and his family, with scales that showed the deep blue-black coloration that Sarah had learned indicated advanced age among the Valthera. But, despite their imposing appearance, their first actions were gestures of peace and gratitude. The lead figure approached slowly, clearly taking care not to appear threatening to the assembled humans. When it reached the communication device, it placed one clawed hand on the interface and began to speak. The translation came through clearly in the device Sarah had helped design. "Children of Earth," the ancient Valthera said, its voice carrying the weight of centuries and the pain of loss, "we are the Valthera ship Morningstar, survivors of the Andros system. We have traveled far in search of hope, and we find it here in your courage and kindness. We bring greetings from the Free Worlds Alliance and an offer of partnership in the great work that lies ahead." Sarah stepped forward, her heart pounding with the magnitude of the moment. "Welcome to Earth," she replied, her words being translated through the device into the musical language of the Valthera. "We are honored by your presence and ready to hear what you have to teach us." What followed was an exchange of information that lasted through the night and into the following day. The newcomers brought star maps showing the extent of the cosmic threat, technological blueprints that would advance human science by centuries, and, most importantly, intelligence about other survivor species and their locations throughout the galaxy. But they also brought warnings. The phenomenon that had destroyed their worlds was not random or natural, it was intelligent, adaptive, and specifically targeted toward eliminating advanced civilizations. The battle to stop it would require unprecedented cooperation between species that had never met, technologies that had never been combined, and strategies that pushed the boundaries of what was possible. Over the following weeks, as more Valthera ships arrived and the first tentative communications were established with other alien refugee populations, Earth found itself at the center of something larger than anyone had imagined. The planet was becoming the hub of a growing interstellar alliance, a place where the scattered remnants of galactic civilization could come together and forge a new future. Sarah often found herself standing in the desert in the early morning hours, watching as alien ships moved across the sky like new constellations. The three dragons who had first crashed in the Arizona desert had become her closest friends and collaborators, their initial plea for help having evolved into a partnership that was reshaping both their species. Atlas, fully recovered from his injuries, had become the primary liaison between the Valthera fleet and Earth's governments. His patient explanations and demonstrated trustworthiness had gone a long way toward easing human concerns about the alien presence. Luna had thrown herself into scientific collaboration, working with human researchers to develop new technologies that combined the best of both species' approaches to physics and engineering. And Sage, with his irrepressible curiosity and enthusiasm, had become something of a cultural ambassador, helping young humans and Valthera learn to communicate and understand each other. The challenges ahead were immense. Humanity was being asked to join a war on a scale that defied comprehension, against an enemy that had already consumed dozens of star systems. But, for the first time in generations, the Valthera and their allies had hope. Earth had provided not just a refuge, but a new beginning, a place where scattered peoples could come together and build something stronger than any of them could achieve alone.
As Sarah watched the sunrise paint the desert sky in brilliant shades of gold and crimson, she reflected on how much had changed since that first day when she had simply been a paleontologist looking for fossils in the sand. The discovery of the Veilthera had transformed not just her life, but the entire trajectory of human civilization. The future remained uncertain, filled with challenges that would test every aspect of human and Veilthera cooperation. But it was a future that would be faced together, as partners in the greatest adventure either species had ever undertaken. And it had all begun with a simple act of compassion, a human woman's willingness to help three stranded beings in the desert, and their trust in her kindness. The stars no longer seemed distant and cold to Sarah. They were destinations now, waypoints on a journey that would take both species far beyond anything they had ever imagined possible. And, somewhere among those distant suns, other refugees were looking toward Earth with hope, knowing that here, at least, they would find welcome and the chance to build a better tomorrow.